everyone. My name's Ida Samantha Moore, and I'm the founder of Elevate Nation LLC. We're Idaho's premier social justice consulting agency. It has to do with my personal issues with the grievance system. And honestly, this is just a call for reform for those of you who were really interested in that shorts video that I explained, where I kind of shared about some of my experiences with the grievance system as a youth impacted by the system. In this video, we're going to explain more about the grievance system, and then the issues that there are common issues within the grievance systems, and then ways that we can create better protections for our young people. When a person is housed in a carceral facility or other out-of-home placements, like in the case of youth or some adults, there's a process to report violations of rights, abuse, and others issues against facilities, staff, or agencies, and this is typically called a grievance process or grievance system. And while in theory it sounds like something that would help prevent many abuses of power and the victimization of vulnerable children and adults, the grievance system is far from perfect. As somebody who has personally faced the challenges of this system, I understand the frustration and helplessness that can arise when legitimate grievances are dismissed or manipulated, or when staff abuse their power and authority to sweep issues under the rug. In today's video, I'll share my own experiences with the grievance system and explore the need for reform to ensure justice and accountability within these institutions. So first off, let's start with understanding the grievance system. For the purpose of this discussion, we will limit the grievance system to the justice system, recognizing that there are many different grievance systems, many different processes in place for different systems, whether it's Medicaid or other aspects of social welfare services. The grievance system is designed to provide individuals within correctional facilities or foster placements with a formal process for addressing concerns or complaints. And like we've talked about before, in practice, the system is often flawed and it can be biased, leading to a lack of accountability and a failure to address serious issues. In my many years of being involved in the Idaho child welfare and justice systems, I've experienced many different harms caused by social workers refusing to follow policy, abusive reentry providers, and many of my peer groups were harassed and had some not quite essay type things happen, but definitely some schmexual harassment. I have to say that just for the YouTube algorithm, so it doesn't flag this video and take it down for violating community standards. For many facilities, they typically have a box or forms that young people can access at any time. At the facility that I was at, there were giant laminated and framed posters, the rules and your rights written down and posted on the walls. So this way you knew the rules, you knew the rights that you had while you were in a facility, and then every day nursing staff was supposed to check the grievance box. And they did that because at the facility I was at, the grievance box was the same as the medical box. So if you had any medical requests, also known as kites, they went to the same place. So if grievances were found, and like the grievances were usually kept like right in the same spot, so it was like a little pad that you could tear a piece of paper out, or it was just like a loose paper that you filled out and could put in. But if grievances were found, they would be provided to the appropriate staff to oversee the grievance complaint. At the facility I was at, if you had a complaint against the staff in your unit, it went to a different unit manager, usually in the same program. Oftentimes, the person overseeing the complaint knew the staff who was being complained about in some way. The closeness and proximity is inappropriate and can cause unfair biases when complaints are made. Once the grievance has been read, you as the grieving party get to meet with the individual overseeing your complaint. The investigator is supposed to talk with you, hear your side of the story, talk with the person you're complaining about, and come with a consensus on how to deal with the issue. They may do other investigations or talk with other people such as witnesses, staff, or members of the group, or even look at audio or visual recordings if available. As the grieving party, you should only sign the grievance once an issue has been resolved. If grievances are not signed, they are escalated up to the next degree of management. In this example, the grievance would be escalated to a program manager, and then from there, depending on the grievance, to a treatment supervisor, and then facility superintendent. So now that we've talked about the process for the justice system, I do want to talk about some of the personal experiences that I had with the grievance system as a justice impacted youth. So during my time in a juvenile correctional facility, I encountered numerous times where the grievance system was abused by staff members. One particular instance that stands out in my memory was where I filed a grievance regarding the lack of court-ordered counseling and other rehabilitative services. Instead of addressing my concerns, I was coerced into signing my grievance stating that the issue that I was complaining about was resolved. And the staff who was overseeing this and conducting the investigation for the grievance told me that I was abusing the grievance system and that my grievance was invalid. And it was told to me that if I did not sign the grievance stating that this was resolved, I would stay in the staff's office until it was signed. And if I missed any groups, classes, or other required activities, I would be sanctioned and have reports sent to the judge presiding over my case, and risk being put out of compliance with programming. And so when you're in a correctional facility that does rehabilitative programming, let me backtrack. So in the state of Idaho, you do not get a fixed amount of time when you go to the juvenile correctional center. What happens is you do a quality, like you do an observation and analysis, and then your treatment team identifies your priority problems. They help create a treatment plan for you, and then you work on that treatment plan, and you do not get out until you are rehabilitated, essentially. And so if you're sanctioned, all of that time that you're sanctioned, it doesn't go towards programming. You lose your privileges. There's some people that, like, I've literally seen them get in so much trouble that they went from being within 30 days of being released all the way to being dropped down to level 1 because of things that they did. This particular experience highlights a common problem within the grievance system, just a lack of impartiality and a failure to hold staff accountable for their actions. When complaints are met with retaliation and dismissal, it creates a culture of fear and mistrust that undermines the purpose of the grievance process. Another particular incident that happened when I was in foster care, and it had to do with the adoptive caseworker that was overseeing my adoption. There was a time where I was meeting with my school guidance counselor, the adoptive caseworker, and a police department, and I believe a police captain or some form of like leadership from the police department at school. And my adoption caseworker told me that there were so many red flags, and that she knew she never should have allowed us to be adopted, and that she ignored Department of Health and Welfare policy and allowed us to be adopted. And so, like, to me, the craziest part about that was the fact that even with her admitting that to school counselors, to police officers, like, there were never complaints, there were never grievances, there was never any kind of follow-up. There was, and to this day, has never been any form of accountability for this social worker. She got to retire and live a cushy retirement, while I and my younger siblings went through many different forms of abuse. This particular experience highlights the complacency that institutions and organizations have and the lack of any accountability levers within the child welfare policy system. We cannot accept children as the collateral damage when designated state agency staff and those tasked with protecting children in their care fail miserably at their duties. In another incident from when I was incarcerated, and I want to preface this next example that there are mentions of schmexual harassment and some other things. We're not going to go in detail into that, but I just wanted to preface that just in case anybody in the audience may want to have that warning in advance. So in another incident from when I was incarcerated, some of the peers in my group in the program I was at were sexually harassed and touched without their consent by someone who told staff that they were going to lie about being transgender and force the facility to put them in the girls program so that they can have better privilege and access to the girls. When my peer group filed PREA complaints and talked to their clergy and did the things that we were supposed to do, nothing was done. At one point in time, I had grabbed a stack of sticky notes and I wrote, "I demand to talk to Superintendent Viner." And literally every single door we passed on our way to education, I slammed those sticky notes on the door like I was a police, like I was the police serving a search warrant. Like I remember so many people just being so angry and just opening the doors and just kind of like, "Oh, you're gonna get in trouble." Da, 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 da. And so, to me, what was the craziest part about this experience was that later in the day, the perpetrator of these offenses was temporarily like taken away from our group while the rest of the group had a discussion with the facility leadership, and that included Superintendent Viner, that included the case manager of the program, both unit managers, staff, and the PREA coordinator at the time. And they essentially told my group that they were ashamed that we were not being accepting of this person and that it was unacceptable that we were okay with receiving hugs from other people from the side or behind, but not by this peer. It was told to the PREA coordinator by a youth in my peer group that she and others did not have to worry about a fully erect ping being rubbed against their backs or their rear ends, or any accidental grabbing or touching of private areas. It was a very, very heated discussion. And when I say that we were all literally shamed, I mean we were all shamed. And that was the exact wording, like, you should all be ashamed of yourselves. As a result, the entire group lost privileges, and we were unable to do each other's hair, makeup, or even give hugs without being warned of consequences or sanctions. The peer who perpetrated these crimes was later administrative released, and that's a process when the facility releases you claiming that you have the skills to be successful, you just refuse to do the programming or the work behind the programming to be released. So within 6 months to a year, this peer who, while they were transgender, we'll say their name was Jessica, and Jessica had returned and stated that they weren't trans and had conned the facility and that staff were idiots. Because they were able to pull one over staff. And it was really sad because the program that I was at, there were a lot of staff who they directly faced retaliation for standing up for us. Like there were staff who went to unit managers and to administration and said that this is wrong. We've had better candidates who were transgender and claimed to be transgender and were transgender before they came into this facility, and we made them still stick to the programming and everything that they were assigned based off of their birth gender. And so, like that, not only did the program lose a lot of staff, but they did so much harm that day. Like when you look at the statistics, that 1 in 3 girls are sexually abused, or the fact that when you're talking about young people who are in the justice system or in the foster system, the likelihood of those youth, regardless of gender, experiencing any form of sexual-based violence is statistically higher. And like in my group, I won't really talk about the experiences or share names or stuff like that, but it was hard because we had several group members, myself included, who had lived through sexual abuse or other forms of sexual harassment. And we even had at one point in time, like while this was happening, we even had a peer who was a survivor of human trafficking. And so like just the psychological damage that was done by blaming all of us was just something that, like, I still talk to a few of my peer groups, and like almost 10 years after the fact, like we're all like, hey man, you remember that? Does that still kind of mess you up inside? And it's like, yeah, it kind of still does. Because what good is a process if you follow the process that is designed to keep you safe and nothing happens? And instead you're shamed and you're put in the same room and the same groups where you have to talk about your trauma to somebody who is actively traumatizing you and actively victimizing you. And I won't say that this person did those things to me, but the fact that like my peers had to go through that was I think honestly one of the most dehumanizing aspects of corrections. It was later told to me in a meeting that I had with the unit manager that the decision was made because the facility we were housed in had faced multiple PREA issues in the past. So like I think a year or two before I had gone to that specific facility, there had been like a federal investigation of some form where a staff member from the nursing department and like a correctional officer from one of the programs were sexually abusing youth in the facility. So they faced a lawsuit, and the facility was almost shut down because it was out of compliance with federal PREA requirements. And so I was essentially told that the facility was going to be facing a lawsuit from a parent wanting to support their child who is claiming to be trans, and a possible PREA investigation, which if they lost would cause the facility to be closed down. And so I guess at the end of the day, the part that makes me the sickest about this is like just after years of counseling, after years of working nationally, it's knowing the fact that like my story is not unique, that there are more groups of women out there that experience the same thing that my group did. To me, as somebody who is a justice system professional, as somebody who proudly wears the mantle of advocate, it makes me sick knowing that the people tasked with keeping us safe chose to keep their own jobs than help my peers who face chronic harassment and victimization at their hands. If you are silent, you are complacent. It doesn't matter if you're the one actively committing that harm. So now that we've talked about a lot of the problems within the grievance system, let's talk about some solutions. And so for a lot of the issues that I've talked about, I think that if we were to implement a third-party grievance system similar to like an ombudsman office, or even have a policy that allows for external investigators, or a policy that allows for external investigations conducted by impartial individuals, like this would provide a more objective and fair process for addressing grievances and holding staff accountable for their actions. Instead of having grievances being assessed by staff in the same facility, allow for someone from quality analysis to supervise the investigation. Other alternatives could be like providing better protections for young people when they file complaints and make the process more streamlined. So facilities could do this by moving from paper in a box system to a tablet style approach where responses are instantly recorded and then triaged by a group of experts to determine who would be the best to handle the particular investigation due to the nature of the complaint. We should have policies and procedures that assess areas of improvement and failures so that way we can determine what happened and what we can do to prevent these harms from happening again. If we can do this every time a young person is restrained, why can't we do this when serious grievances are submitted? The importance of personal stories and advocacy, and these are powerful tools for advocacy as they provide a human element to complex issues. By sharing our experiences, we can raise awareness, inspire action, and create meaningful change. However, it is important to remember that my story is just one of many, and there are countless others who have faced similar, even worse experiences. We should not base reform on just my opinions, as I am but one person who has been affected by the failures within our grievance systems. We must do better at including as many voices that have been affected by positive and negative grievance outcomes as possible. We cannot make change that affects all of us without including all of us. In conclusion, my personal experiences with the grievance system have highlighted the need for reform within correctional facilities. I believe that by implementing third-party grievance systems or other impartial investigation policies, we can ensure that complaints are taken seriously and addressed in a fair and transparent manner that allows young people to feel heard, validated, and feel semblances of humanity while they are incarcerated. I urge policymakers, advocates, and individuals alike to support these reform efforts and help create a more just and accountable system for all. If you're interested in learning more or hearing more about our experiences or stories, please follow us, hit that like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to comment. Thank you so much, and we'll see you around.